You're going to be man enough? Well, be man enough to go deeper. What do you mean? Right? Go deeper into porn. Go deeper into sex and these stories. Go deeper into what else happened. And I'd be like, okay, let's go. And that's why it was uncomfortable, because I was constantly being challenged. Tell this story. I'm going to tell my story. And I'm going to talk about being man enough. Then I got to be man enough to write it. And so it was a very uncomfortable, messy process. And I relate it to a cold plunge a few times in the book, as you know. But writing the book was a cold plunge. It doesn't feel good to get in ice cold water.
Yeah.
It just feels terrible, but it feels great when you get out.
Welcome to the podcast, Tapping Creativity, with myself, Matthew C. Temple. And each week, we're going to dive into questions and issues and inspiration around creativity and the creative process. Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of Tapping Creativity Podcast. And today I have a super special guest. I'm enormously excited to have Justin Baldoni with us today. You probably know him as a director, as an actor, TED speaker with over 8 million views on his TED Talk. He's a change maker, and now he's an author of this fantastic book, which, as you can see, I did my research. It was fantastic. So we're going to dive into that a bit. And I have to say that I got to know Justin and Justin's work when my daughter came up to me and said, "Do you know who Justin Baldoni is? Because you totally remind me of him," or "He reminds me of you." I forget which way that went. And immediately I had to go look this guy up, because I'm like, is my kid dissing me now? Turns out she wasn't dissing me. She was giving me an enormous compliment. And so today it is my honor to have you on the show. Welcome, Justin.
Oh, I love that story, and that's so sweet. And it was a compliment to me as well.
Well, thank you. At the time, I think I just started filming my documentary, Hardball, The Girls of Summer, about women who play baseball. And as you can imagine, women who play baseball there's not a lot of them. And the challenges that they come up against made it worthy of a documentary. So a lot of these conversations, particularly the feminist conversations, were starting at the same time as this question also around, well, if this is so hard for women, what is it about men and this definition of masculinity that makes it so hard? And so that was a bit of, this connection. And I know you've made that connection as well. Before I start throwing some questions at you, I want to say that I loved your book. I read it from front to back. I thought it was simple yet profound. And when I say simple, I don't mean that as a negative. I mean that as a positive. It was just an honest, vulnerable, true story. And it wasn't preachy. And one of the things that kind of defines that, and you put it right there on the cover, is Undefining My Masculinity. So it's not like this is the prescription for everybody. It is your process, and it is a unique process. While at the same time, though it's unique, it's not a process that anyone needs to go on alone. It's not a solo journey. It's one that there are actually resources out there, men who have traversed the terrain, and you are one of them, and documented so beautifully in your book. So
thank you. It's just so funny. I get chills when you say all these things, because it's so weird for me. Like, you're sitting there holding my book and you've read it, and it's only been out for 2 days. And so there's this, I'm having this moment of like, what the heck? I wrote a book. We're talking about my book. You actually read it? Because you're always wondering, like, is anyone going to read this thing? Like, is anyone going to actually read this? Am I crazy for writing this? Why am I putting this story in here? Oh my God, I hope nobody reads this thing. But it's really nice that you did, and it means a lot to me hearing those words. So thank you, man.
It was really my honor. And let's go ahead and start with this, because in chapter 3, you said that you have a hard time sitting still at your desk. And I think there are a lot of creative people in the world, people who have a story that's important and vital to tell, that struggle with, for one reason or another, whether it's self-doubt or whether it's ADD or whether it's whatever it is. So I'm really curious, like, what was your process? And I hate to use the word secret, but go ahead, your secret for being a guy who has a hard time sitting down at a desk, and you wrote a 300 and something page book. So
yeah, it just kept getting longer and longer and longer. Because I was only supposed to write 55,000 words, and it ended up being like 118,000 words or 108,000 words. What is my process? Look, I don't know. I had to kind of come up with one. What I learned For me, as you can see, I mean, I'm even fidgeting around right now. Like I'm always moving around, and you're just zen where you are, like just like a monk, just boom, you're grounded. And I'm just like a creative energy ball, and that's how I've always been. And it's crazy. My son is like that, and it drives us crazy. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so
My poor
sorry, sweetheart.
parents.
My son is me. Um, my poor parents. No wonder they didn't know what to
Yeah.
do with me. I'm still dealing with that trauma. But I've learned that, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's a terrible analogy. I'm sorry.
But go with
I'm
it.
sorry,
Why not?
PETA. But I've learned that for me, it was important to do things in small doses. So I'm also one of these extreme focusers. So if you get me in with you, I'm in. If I am writing, I am writing. And once that flow starts, it's like I'll just keep going and keep going and keep going. But what I've learned is that I have to kind of pay attention to this little voice in my head that's like, okay, you're getting a little tired. Or when the inspiration slows down a little bit, what I learned to do is step away. And I'll do anything. Unfortunately, when if I was writing the book and I was alone, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go look at what's happening in the world, or, I'll go to my Instagram for a second, or I'll watch a video. I just need to take a break, going for a walk, going outside, going and playing with my kids, going and just moving around and moving my body. So that I don't exhaust myself, and then I can come back to it. There's a lot of people that believe in like taking, working for 45 minutes and then taking a 10-minute break. Yep. Working for 45 minutes, taking a 10-minute break, working for 40, and everyone has their different versions of that. That does work very well for me. And I've noticed now I'm at the point where I can work and I can work and I can work and I can write, or I can do whatever. And I'm like, okay, now it's time for a break. And I just get up and I'll go. It doesn't matter who's around or what they're doing. I'm like, I just, let's take 5. Go on a bio break. Go to the bathroom. Go poop. Whatever it is you need to do, just get away from what you're doing. And that's been really helpful for me.
You kind of open the book with like, this wasn't fun. It was outside of my comfort zone. It was hard. Like, who am I to do this or whatever? And I love that you like put that right at the beginning in the introduction, because first of all, it's honest, it's vulnerable. And your story is the one possession that you have that is totally priceless, and it's only yours. And so, one of the things, I mentor and work with creatives, usually a lot of time people sort of earlier on in their career who are like, who find these different things that they come up against, different challenges. And one of those is that whatever you're doing, your creative process, whether for you, it's going to be acting, I'm sure, or directing. But in this case, you spoke about it in writing, this wasn't necessarily fun, and it was really hard. So what did you, like, what worked for you to basically say, you know what, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to be a shitty writer and just show up and suck and suck and suck until eventually maybe I'll have a book that's awesome. But I'm sure there were points throughout this where you're like, no one is ever going to want to read this. My publisher is going to be like, give me a break. But yet you kept going, and here you got this fantastic book. So how did that work for you, getting through that?
And then even once I gave it to my publisher and they said it was great, I was like, you're lying. It's not, it's terrible. But that's my own battle with enoughness. Well, here's the thing is I actually wrote the intro first.
Okay.
And the original intro was 30 pages of me apologizing for myself. I was in Mexico with my family, and I had to start writing the book. And I'm like, here we go. This was right after Jane the Virgin wrapped. So it was May 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I wrote the intro. There was no Wi-Fi. It was like, I remember where I was, the whole thing. And it was just me vomiting all of my insecurities and doubts about why the hell I'm doing this. It was almost me talking myself out of writing the book while writing the book. And I was like, all right, this is where we're starting. And then I put it away. And then, over the next couple of years, started to figure out the bones of it. I did because I was working so much. I was shooting movies. I hired one of my best friends, and I was doing a lot of I would be like, all right, I'm just going to talk for an hour and a half. And then we'd translate it. She'd translate it for me. And then I'd go and look at it and be like, oh, what I said there isn't good. And then what'll happen is I gave myself bones. And then I would go in and
So what do you mean
write.
bones?
And that worked really well for, like, I gave myself a skeleton. I gave myself,
Got it. Okay.
I gave myself the basic building blocks of a body. And because I would talk through a lot of things. And for me, the creative process, as I'm talking, I'll remember things, but as I'm writing, I write totally different than I talk. So I had to rewrite a lot of what I spoke. And then I was like, oh, and then I would just start going and going and going, and the structure would come. And then I went back and I rewrote the intro, because over the course of those 2 years, I got more confident in the fact that I was writing a book.
Right.
And also, being quite honest, as I gave people the intro and the various chapters as they were getting done, I got a lot of notes like, you got to stop apologizing. You're not going to make me want to read this book if you're saying sorry for taking your time to read the book. Right. That was really what it was. I'm an apologist in many ways. It's like, I'm so sorry you're taking your time to read the book. You could do so many other things. Like, no, you got to take that out. And even down to the very end, I had the great pleasure of getting to know and becoming friends with Glennon Doyle, who I think is one of the great writers of, history now, but, at least modern literature, right? Specifically, through a feminist movement and via her eyes. And she was the one that said, hey, you got to stop apologizing. So I even took out even more after she looked at it and she read it, and she reminded me of my own enoughness. And it was really beautiful.
Nice.
She's like, you are an expert. She said, Justin, you are an expert. And even in her sweet voice, you are an expert. You do know this. You don't have to apologize for it. And I'm like, damn it, Glennon Doyle, you're right. I'm a cheetah. I'm a cheetah. Set me out. Set me free. And it was a process. And the other piece about this that's really important for everybody to know is I wrote this book and showed it to so many people and got so much feedback and had so many other opinions. And that this book is an amalgamation of people that I love and I'm close to that were willing to put their thoughts and ideas in it with me and call me out on stuff that maybe is ableist language or things like that. And I had so many friends say, hey, you should go deeper here, calling me on my stuff. Like, you're going to be man enough? Well, be man enough to go deeper. What do you mean? Right? Go deeper into porn. Go deeper into sex and these stories. Go deeper into what else happened. And I'd be like, okay, let's go. And that's why it was uncomfortable, because I was constantly being challenged. If I'm going to be out here and I'm going to tell this story, I'm going to tell my story, and I'm going to talk about being man enough, then I got to be man enough to write it. And so it was a very uncomfortable, messy process. And I relate it to a cold plunge a few times in the book, as you know, but writing the book was a cold plunge. It doesn't feel good to get in ice cold water.
Yeah.
It just feels terrible, but it feels great when you get out.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's one of the things that can get forgotten, particularly going through this process where you think, oh, I'm revealing sort of too much. Or if I write this, I remember really early on in my career, like I wouldn't even want to write about certain things, because I was like, this might be revealing something about me that I don't want people to know, but yet
people to know.
Right? But as soon as you hold yourself back, people can really sniff out the inauthenticity. And then right? And then the second thing is what we ultimately love. And it's one of the things I loved about the book was you weren't saying, you could have been like, hey, I'm Justin Baldoni. Yeah, I am man enough because I figured all this shit out. And now you can come read my book because I'm like, I used to be not so good and now I'm super good. And instead you were like, I'm on this process, and you didn't try to paint yourself anything other than who you actually are, which also gives your audience the license and the permission to also be honest and vulnerable.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was the entire intention of the book. I could not write this book from a place of an expert because this is such a nuanced subject, and I am a straight white guy.
Yep.
Right. I have immense amounts of power and privilege in my life, and yet what makes this so interesting to people is that I'm the one with all the power and privilege challenging the very system that enables me to have the power and privilege. And that's what I think is so confusing and why it makes a lot of men uncomfortable. And for me, the only way I could do that is by being radically honest.
Yeah.
And that sucks because everything that I've been taught as a man has shown me that I can't be honest, because that's when those things are used against me. And I want to be popular. I want to be liked. I want other guys to to think that I'm cool. Those are the things that I was raised with. And in my head, I go, but if I put that on paper, then other people are going to read that and they're going to know that I'm insecure. Yeah. They're going to know and what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm not going to be respected? And what I had to learn is, oh, wait a second. I'm about to do something that other men don't do for the sake of other men. And if I think about the traditionally masculine qualities that I was raised with, there's nothing more fucking masculine than that. Right. And I was like, wait a second, hold on a second here. So you're telling me that by liberating myself and taking my shame out of that, as I say in the book, that like dark, dusty, dimly lit basement of my heart, by bringing it out, by putting it in this book with the sole intention of setting myself free so that other men can set themselves free, that I will be doing the exact same thing that men have been doing forever to try to gain acceptance and clout and respect and power. Oh my God, I'm man enough to be brave. I might not be running into a burning building. I might not be, stopping a school shooter or going to war, but I am going to a different kind of war, and I am man enough to do that. So I was like, holy shit, writing this book makes me a man. And I reversed it. And when I got to that point, I'm like, you know what? You can use my vulnerability against me. I mean, I just did a thing for the London Times. Oh my God, my publicist is going to hate that I keep talking about this, but it's such a good example. I just did this thing for the London Times, and they kind of brought me into it, and they were so excited to talk to me because they wanted to hear, my response to the not all men thing that was going around, that hashtag. And this lovely, Englishman reads my book, and he sits there and we're talking about these things, and he's interviewing me, and he's opening up a little bit and getting me to open up, and I'm an open book. And I had the idea, I'm like, you know what? This guy's totally going to use my vulnerability against me. I can just see it. It was like these moments where it's like, and I'm going to let him do it. It's going to happen. And I'm going to be bummed about it, but it's going to happen. And so I say, as an example, I talk about porn, right? And at one point he asked me, like, does my porn progress? What kind of stuff I'm watching? And I'm like, first of all, that's a totally inappropriate question. But I was honest with him. I'm like, no, actually, I'm really blessed because I've been doing so much work. And the porn that I watched as an adult man is actually the same porn I watched as a 10-year-old. Because that's stuck in my brain, because that 10-year-old who was dealing with that trauma, who was dealing with loneliness and fear and isolation, was going to porn to calm and soothe himself. And as I got older, when those feelings came up, that's why I watch porn, right? Because for me as a man, I don't watch porn to get off. I watch porn to soothe myself. And so again, and he puts a comment in like, like, I still don't understand how he as a father with a little boy can watch porn, right? And this is the thing that we do as men, is we get somebody's vulnerability, and then we bring ourselves up. And so in this article, I say, hey, I don't talk about toxic masculinity. I don't believe in saying it. I think that saying toxic masculinity hurts men because they won't engage in a conversation because it's been weaponized and politicized. And I want to invite men in. And guess what they called the article? Justin Baldoni on a journey to end toxic masculinity. And of course they do. And this is the example. This is the thing that we do. And I had to sit there and go, I know this is going to happen. But you know what? Bring it on, because I know who I am. I know my enoughness. I'm disappointed that you did that. Disappointed that you used me to put me down to lift yourself up. But by my sharing, by me being vulnerable, that makes me as much of a man as anybody else. And I hope that you feel good too. And there's room for both of us. There's room for all of us.
I'm so glad you brought that up. There were literally like 5 things that I wanted to go in on that. And one, actually, let's talk about it. Since you did say brave enough. I do want to get to the toxic masculinity question in a minute.
Yeah, sure.
But, this idea of brave enough. And you also talked kind of early on in the book, you talked about climbing up on, I think it was a bridge, right? And you're like, your buddies were down below, like,
Yeah. Chapter
Yeah.
1. It's the beginning. It's how we
Yeah.
start the whole book.
So it's just kind of like this brave enough thing. And, my fiance is Kenyan, and we were living in Kenya for the last year and a half or so. We came back almost a year ago. So we were driving, and, I've been driving since I was like 12. And Sarah started driving when she was 27 or something. She moved to America and started to drive. So a lot of times if we're in a hairy situation, of course, who drives? But A, I'm a guy. So there's an expectation, and then B, I have more, experience. And where we lived in Kenya was in the highlands. So it was really high, and it was rainy and mountains. And she was driving. And at one point she said, when it starts getting really bad, I'll let you drive. And then she said, you know what, if I do that, I'm going to not have the opportunity to practice doing this. And it got me thinking about the fact that even when I was younger, I had some experiences of driving that were harrowing, and I never should have done it. But as we've discussed, I couldn't say I'm scared or I can't do this. So I would plow through. And so I see the negative sides of this, kind of how I have to prove myself in the world. But I can't deny that in my own life, that social pressure has also in turn kind of put me to the place where I've got this like extreme competence where I can do a lot of things because I could never say, no, I can't do that. Like, do you know how many like super high bridges I've jumped off of in my life? The first ones weren't easy, but now I finally found my limit at 60 feet. I will never do that again.
Oh, you can't get me to jump off a 20-foot bridge. So,
well, someone's learned a lesson properly.
But that's also
it's totally okay. It's right? Really smart.
It's great. And the thing is though, it's great. Like it's great that you can jump off of a 60-foot bridge. And when I hear that, I don't need to feel like I'm not good enough or I'm not enough of a man because I don't want to. There's got to be room for all of it. And that's kind of the point. Right,
exactly. Well, I just so you know, I did. That was the highest I've ever done. And it was one of those things where I got up on this bridge and there are all these people around and like, I'm up here now. I can't turn around. And I'm like, well, now I know my limit. Maybe now I'm going to come way back down. But I did what...
Did it hurt?
Yeah, it really hurt. 60 feet really hurts. But my point, kind of going back, is this thing of like, am I brave enough to do it? And I also want to know, like, some of that sort of that we can look back and see this kind of negative patterning of like, man up, grow a pair, do this thing. The sort of other side of that is an invitation into extreme competency that I take as a gift. So I see both these sides, and I'm curious what even when you were in this, like you're in these things right now where you're saying, oh, this guy might use this against me, but I'm actually brave enough to take it. And that may also have some roots in the same patterning and conditioning as the unhealthy stuff.
I think that it's neither here nor there, man. I think it's both. It's like an improv. It's yes and.
Yeah.
I think that competency is super important, but I don't believe it needs to come at the expense of cutting ourselves off from our feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe that's where the but is.
Right.
I think that we should be teaching competency, encouraging people to go into their fears, right? But not at the expense of their safety or their mental health or their well-being, and teaching kids to numb themselves to the point, as Bell Hooks says, to engage in an act of psychic self-mutilation.
Right. Yeah.
Because really that's what we're doing, right? Because like we don't want to create robots. We don't need soldiers, right? Okay, the army can do that. If you want to go into the army, you can do that there. Is that the best thing for your mental health, your emotional well-being? I don't know. I don't think so. But that's a larger conversation. Yeah. And if we are going to do that, then you know what? As a government, we probably should make sure we have like perfected the mental health system for our army and military veterans when they come back, especially.
Right.
But that's not there either. So when it comes to jumping off bridges and acts of physical bravery and toughness, I think the other thing is that we generally as a society equate bravery to acts of physical risk.
Yes.
So that's the other problem is okay, what's it mean to be brave? All right, jumping off of a bridge, jumping off of a 60-foot bridge. Okay, I don't want to jump off that bridge. Well, then you're not brave. Done. Black and white. That's not true. And there's got to be space for the boy and the kid and the girl who don't want to jump off the bridge. And we have to teach those kids that when they're on that bridge and when they feel like, no, this feels wrong, right? Our brains are here to protect us. Our brains are sending a signal saying, no, you could die. Don't do this. We have a self-preservation. Our whole system is set up for self-preservation, right? That's actually what dopamine is. Some of these chemicals in our brains are there to help us. Oh, sex feels good. Have sex, procreate. Right? It's the reward center in our brains. And then the opposite happens. So we're on a bridge. Oh, don't jump off. I'm scared. When we drown those things out, when we just don't listen to those things every single time, we're training ourselves Pavlovian-like to not listen, which means that we're not going to listen the next time, and then the next time, and the next time, and eventually we won't even hear the voice.
Right.
That's my problem with it.
Then we train ourselves so well with ourselves. And how do we actually listen to the other people in our lives? How do, when a woman is saying, this is my experience, and you're in an intimate relationship, to say, how can I haven't been training myself listening to me. How in the world can I listen to you if I can't listen to myself?
Can I train? Exactly. And then we do the same thing with empathy and compassion. We drown these things out. We don't allow ourselves to have the feelings. We don't allow ourselves to have empathy and compassion. We don't allow ourselves. And then, who are we? We're robots. We become robots, right? The other day, I was doing an interview the other day, and I just, for fun, I just was like, I'm just going to Google masculine and feminine, and let's look at a few different articles that pop up. And, you have all these words, masculine, feminine. What are the stereotypical definitions of what these are? And then these words pop up. And I noticed when I was doing that interview, I said, what's so crazy? Look at this. If you look at all the masculine traits, that's how you would build a robot. And if you wanted to inject life into the robot, you'd give it the feminine traits. Because those feminine traits, there's no algorithm that can come up with those. How do you teach compassion to a robot? How do you teach empathy? How do you teach feeling and sensitivity? You can't teach that. You cannot put those into a robot. That's why robots can never be human. So in this, I'm like, oh my God, we're robots. And why? Yeah. We have to allow ourselves to be human. No, throw that all away. Let's take some of those feminine qualities because those are human qualities. Let's look at these masculine qualities because these are human qualities. And let's allow men to have both. Let's allow women to have both. Let's undefine the whole damn thing so that when a woman becomes a boss and she's in the boardroom and she demands attention and she needs to be listened to when she's speaking, that she's not called a bitch. Right. And let's make sure that it's okay that when a man stays home to care for children when the woman is out working, that he's not shamed or bullied, that there's space for him on the playground and in the support groups as well. And I think we need to do that across the board. There's a billion different analogies that we could have chosen. And it's just all about making room for our full human selves.
Man, I think that's so important. And I want to use that actually to segue into this term toxic masculinity. I also write a blog called Dude, Let's Talk that's really aimed towards, issues of redefining masculinity.
You're an overachiever too, man. You're jumping off bridges, you're running marathons, you're doing podcasts, you're making documentaries, you're writing blogs. That's pretty cool.
Well, you know what? It's part of how much of it is because I don't feel like I'm quite man enough, so I got to keep pushing in order to prove it.
There we go. There we go. And there's a little part of you that right now, when I said that, you're like, oh, that's why I was doing it. It's all there, right? I gave you the cookie in your brain because I saw you. I'm like, oh, dude, that's really cool. You're an overachiever. And then you're like, oh,
bingo.
Wait, this is for no reason.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll prove all sorts of things. And I wish I could say there was no truth to that, but then I would be lying. So this thing of toxic masculinity, I'm going to tell you why the term hasn't bothered me, and let's kind of go into that a little bit. And I think because when you were just describing, looking up and the way that the internet or the way that Google, you look up what is masculine, what's feminine, these kind of qualities in masculinity, I find are masculine qualities are amazing. It's like anything else, Yep.
I agree.
And those qualities have to be totally honored. Now, like anything else, you can almost pervert anything, right? So the reason why I thought this idea of toxic masculinity, and I've actually moved away from using that, and I use healthy and unhealthy masculinity in my vernacular. But And for maybe for the same reasons as you, is like all of a sudden this is a political thing, and that's just not right. But I also kind of had to stop and say, well, wait a second. Like there are like the shiitake is not like pissed off at whatever the poisonous, the toxic mushroom is when we say toxic mushrooms, because they're like, that mushroom is indeed toxic. And if we don't point out the ones that are toxic, you just might not eat me or.
But the shiitake doesn't have a fragile ego.
I think that just ended that particular point.
and unfortunately, the fragile ego is the barrier to entry.
Right.
And I'm not saying we need to placate men or baby or coddle men, but if we have a men's issue and men are feeling attacked because we as men just have fragile egos, let's just call it what it is. We have fragile egos, right? Just think about it. We even say that we've even invented things like the word emasculate. Like a woman, okay, so you're telling me that we view women as less than, but yet she somehow has the power to take away your masculinity, to emasculate you? Look how fragile our egos are, that we have to come up with terms because we're so threatened by our own power and the power of a woman that a woman can take away our masculinity. Is that how fragile it is? So if you think about just all of the problems that exist in the world, so many of them are caused by men and fragile egos. And if we want to fix those problems, we need to bring men in. We have to call men into the conversation. And nothing changes when people are called out. No behavioral changes, no lasting behavioral changes ever happen when someone's disciplined and scolded and called out. There's a difference between accountability and being called out. But calling somebody out and shaming them and making them feel bad doesn't change anything. All you do is radicalize those people. And those people become defensive, and then they shut down and they will never hear what you have to say. That's why as women were gaining power and the feminist movement really took steam and women were, fighting for their liberation, and so many men felt emasculated because women were stepping into their power. And women were rightfully pissed off at men. And so men viewed women as these man-hating feminists, right? They call them things like feminazis, which even just think about that for 1 second. Feminazi. Like, we don't even think about the language that we use. But all of that is stemming from men being angry and hurt and their feelings are hurt by these women. Really, that's what it is. That's what's happening. When you say toxic masculinity, there's a lot of men that puff up their chests and get defensive, but really they're hurt. They're like, but I'm not bad. Stop calling me bad.
Right.
And that's what they feel. So I'm trying to then put myself into those shoes. I do not get personally offended when someone says toxic masculinity. I just don't. And what I think we're saying in many ways, and what I say in the book, is that masculine qualities are awesome, but the medicine can also become the poison if given in the wrong dose. Right?
Exactly.
That's it. And so with all that saying, I want to reach men.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to women. Women know this. The only reason I'm able to write the book is because women have written all the books. Women have been like living in their vulnerability and believing its power forever. Women commune with each other and get to know each other through vulnerability. On first get to know each other sessions with women, generally there's an exchange of vulnerability. That's what happens because they've been told that that's acceptable behavior. They've been conditioned to do that, and men do the opposite. So I want to invite men in. That's why this is an invitational book. It's not a motivational book. And that's why I'm using my own stories. And that's why I don't say toxic masculinity, because at the end of the day, I would rather not use a phrase that's been weaponized and politicized. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent thinker. I'm a Baha'i. We don't identify with the political party. I'm not a liberal. I don't prescribe to that language. And so I'm not trying to turn you into anything that you're not. And I'm not trying to shame you into being a man. And I'm not going to apologize for being a man, but I will apologize for the way that the patriarchy and masculinity has socialized me to hurt other people and myself.
And then that's so key.
And I think that's what it comes down to.
Particularly when you come around, right? And I think that's one of the things that can often get missed in that conversation is that how this system has been so dehumanizing of men and masculinity, is that you can't be your authentic self as a human being. You have this unique place in Mother Nature of having emotionality and feelings and compassion. Like a lion can't say, you know what, that's a cute little lamb, I'm not going to eat that. The lion, that's not its place. But as a human being, you have that choice, that freedom of choice that can come through feeling and compassion. And yet we basically have created the system that says your humanity is bad, so you need to push it down in favor of this robotic thing, almost like you described it. And that to me is this huge tragedy. I think, again, kind of like coming from, I mentioned when I was working on Hardball, The Girls of Summer, was that I was like, wait, like this is so disappointing, because what we're kind of presenting men with is something that's it's just not fair. And that was a bit of also my shift. And I think yours went through this too. I'm a proud feminist to, wait a second, they can deal with them. They've got great role models. They're doing really good work. They deal with them.
They can take care of it. They can take care of it.
I need to move over and say, it's not that we've been neglecting women for too long as a society or culture, really, or maybe not. I mean, I'm young, and at least in my lifetime, it's that we've actually been neglecting our boys, and we've been allowing boys to grow up in a world that doesn't support their humanity. And that's such a tragedy. And I realized at a certain point, when I'm like paying hundreds of dollars for my daughters to go take self-defense classes, I was like, the only way that my daughters will ever really be safe is when men won't rape anymore. And the only way for that to happen ultimately is that a peaceful world is a world full of happy and fulfilled men. Because an unhappy man and a fulfilled man does not start war. They do not rape. They don't kill themselves. They don't kill others. They don't go to the needle in the bottle.
They take care of their environment.
Yes, it's amazing, right? And so it's like, oh. And so when you actually bring that up about sort of not using that word toxic masculinity, I honor that, because you're right. The issue is, how do we actually invite men in to say, let's honor ourselves. Let's not actually be defensive. And you use this word, your medicine can become your poison. The other way around is your poison can become your medicine. That's the alchemical idea, right? And it's also, it's the story of every hero's journey, which is one of the things that often has made me say, why are men being so defensive when it's being pointed out? Because the hero's journey basically means I screw up a lot. I screw up more, like shit comes at me hardcore that I can't quite handle. And ultimately, when I get to the end, I'm victorious, but I can only be victorious if I suffer through all of my mistakes and my shortcomings. And so therefore, to me, dealing with this issue of unhealthy masculinity, or however we want to name it, is vital to our hero's journey as men. And that's what we should all be signing up for.
It's our dragon. It's the dragon we have to slay. That's the one. And you brought up a good point. We should end with this, which is we should not be teaching our daughters and the women in our life to not get raped. We got to be teaching the boys not to rape, right? In the same way that after the young woman Sarah in England was killed by the police officer, the UK put a curfew on the city for women, not for men.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Think about that for a second. Right? They said it's not safe for women to be out. Now, a woman didn't rape and kill her. A man did. But they looked at it from, we can't ask the men to stay out. We have to ask the women to stay out. Wouldn't the just version of that be, men, we don't know which of you are rapists. You all have to stay home. And if you're out, you're going to be arrested. So women can feel free to go out. And that's the flip. That's the switch. If we're teaching our boys to protect our girls, then we're in action too late.
Right.
That's got to start first.
Yeah, because then it's like, what do we set up so that we're actually healthy enough that we don't do that?
It's a reaction.
Yeah.
So
this has been fantastic. Once again, thank you so much for coming out and being on the show. For everyone listening and or watching, if you haven't yet had a chance to get a copy of Man Enough, I would run out and do that now that it's available. And, you can find Justin has done some amazing film work as well. 2 feature films, a couple of documentary short form pieces, a fantastic TED Talk. So look for him. Yeah. Thanks again for coming on the show.